Because of the limited film on the work of Wrens in World War II, this video includes a recruiting film from the period with an unofficial account from a Wren based in Southampton at the time. Irene Guiney-Ray served with the Women's Royal Naval Service, referred to as Wrens, from the 8th of March, 1944 until the 19th of August, 1946. Having volunteered before she was 19 years of age, on the 8th of March, 1944 she was sent to Mill Hill, London, where 3 weeks of interviews and some preliminary training followed before finally being accepted for service as a Wren. It was a proud day indeed, she says, when her uniform was received.
During short spells at Southsea and Weymouth I got my first taste of doing 3 shifts, or watches, as they were known in the Navy. It was hard to remain awake during my first night watch in a signals distribution office. On the 27th of April 1944, I joined HMS Squid at Southampton and remained with it until the following September. Living accommodation was in a big block of flats in its own grounds, which also housed the offices where I worked. Entry was gained through large double gates with 2 guards always on duty. When Wrens returned very late after an evening out, to avoid being reported we had to pay a forfeit, a quick kiss for one of the guards. While at Southampton, I was never reported for being late. One escapade involved 2 friends on the way back from Lyndhurst, where we'd been for a fish and chip supper. We got a lift in an army truck already occupied by army officers and Navy sub-lieutenants, and ended up aboard a tank landing craft at Southampton docks. Lots of gin was pressed upon us, but the young midshipman detailed to serve the drinks noticed my glasses were being pushed away full. By the time he came with the next round the atmosphere was very noisy, but he whispered, "I'm putting just water in your glasses," and winked at me. I must admit to having been very relieved, being mindful of Mother's dire warning about what happened to girls who did not stay in control. Needless to say, it was very late before we returned to our accommodation. A highlight at the time was when a party of Wrens was invited officially on board HMS Bulolo. We were given tea and tiny sandwiches with the crusts cut off, served by big, burly sailors, followed by a short cruise down Southampton water. HMS Bulolo was used as a signals headquarters ship to direct the D-Day landings at Gold Beach. Another spree was when, with 2 friends, I went to Bournemouth to see a play written by the aunt of one of my friends, Kate O'Brien. Returning to Southampton, we'd walked many miles before an army staff car stopped for us. I ended up sharing the back seat with a lieutenant colonel, and got a real drubbing down for being so foolish to hitchhike. My friends were in the front with the driver and never spoke a word. I couldn't stand the silence, so I started chattering. Having been told that the car was only going as far as Lyndhurst, we ended up being taken all the way back to our accommodation at Southampton. As we got out of the car, the lieutenant colonel asked if I would mind if he phoned me, so I gave him my number and naturally asked how I would know who was calling. Unfortunately, I cannot now remember his name. I never really expected to hear from him again, but we did in fact become good friends. We went out together a lot, he always calling for me in the staff car with driver, and we had some very enjoyable outings. I especially liked being taken for lunch at the Polygon Hotel, at the time reputed to be the best in Southampton. Sometimes we went for a drive through the New Forest where his camp was located. Once, I was given a tour of the camp in a duck, a peculiar vehicle capable of traveling on land and water. Flowers and chocolates were sometimes left for me at the gate of the complex where I worked, so perhaps it was no small wonder when I went on duty once and found a cutting from a Reader's Digest magazine stuck to the wall near my desk. I was in no doubt that it had been put there by one of the sub-lieutenants with whom we shared an office, judging by all the smirks and grins. It read, "When a man reaches the rank of colonel, it means he has become something semi-eternal." On the 11th of September 1944, I moved to HMS Shrapnel, still in Southampton, but to a new abode in Archers Road and to a new workplace in the Flag Officer in Charge building at the docks. At that time, I was friendly with a Canadian soldier, Jim. One Sunday, we decided to go to the Isle of Wight, where I'd been a few times previously. We spent a few pleasant hours walking around before making our way back to the ferry. Horror of horrors, the last ferry had left an hour beforehand. We hadn't thought to check if the Sunday timetable was the same as that used during the week. I ended up staying at a Rennery, while Jim stayed at the YMCA. For me, the result was 3 days confined to barracks, sewing hems on new counterpanes. Interspersed with the frivolity, there were more serious times. Southampton had suffered a lot of damage from bombs before I was sent there, but it was only when the doodlebugs started being used by the Germans that I realized what war could really be like. On night duty once again, I was taking a signal over the telephone, when we heard the sound of a doodlebug quite near. The engine cut out, followed by the explosion when 4 of us, all Wrens, immediately dived under the table. My telephone was left hanging over the side of the table with a voice calling, frantically, "What's happening?" When all was quiet I answered, but the other party was still so frantic that I couldn't understand her, so I said, "Hang on a sec, I've lost my specs, I can't hear you properly." I had my leg pulled for a long time after that. Fortunately our building remained intact, but there was a lot of damage in the surrounding area. My final posting was on the 6th of March 1946, to HMS Flower Down, near Winchester. That was a wireless transmission station operated by sailors, with only a few Wrens to collect and distribute their signals, as they were received. Plenty of tots of rum were offered from the sailors receiving a daily ration. Many a laugh was enjoyed with them. Come D-Mob Day, or rather when I was released as stated on my records, on the 19th of August 1946 I returned to Civvy Street. Life was never quite the same again.